Alright, hello, good morning. Okay, I hope this is recording. Sorry, I've been having some troubles with the recordings, right? Okay. For this week, right, obviously, we are looking into the methods of data collection, right? Methods of data collection that are permitted, right? That are mostly conducted under the quantitative research methods, right? Certain methods might be overlapping, right? Might be useful for both quantitative and qualitative, right? But today we are going to look how specific it is in context and how specific it is to be employed in your quantitative research, right? Right. Under these quantitative methods, obviously, we are going to look into a few different methods, right? A few different mechanisms, right? What are the objectives or the objective of each and every methods, and the weaknesses, the positive aspects of this method in different contexts, and so on and so forth, right? Before we begin, right? In social research generally, right, when we are speaking about social research generally, right, we are speaking about three main form of data collection, right? It is either by asking people, right, by either in the form of surveying or conducting interviews, right, face-to-face interviews or phone interview and so on and so forth, or through service questionnaire forms and so on. Observing or studying documents, right? And this is what we call as observing could be can be regarded as a primary source of research, while studying documents can be considered a secondary source, right? Here, that is the basic understanding, right? Under social research, there are three main forms of data collection. However, today we are going to look in what is specific to quantitative methods itself. In interview, right? Interview is a commonly used method, right, of collecting information from people. Right? As you have known, right? We have seen this being used in the employment sector, right? Even educational sector, right? We have mock interviews to practice for the real industrial interviews, internships. We have interviews for internships. Even now, certain university employing the methods or mechanisms of interviewing the candidate before they are before they are enrolled, right? So obviously, right, there are many definitions, right? So for instance, we have monad, who says that involves an interviewer reading questions to respondents, recording the answers, right? Or another one says a verbal interchange, often face-to-face, through telephone may be used interview, right? Right now, the technology has allowed that even the situation of pandemic, right, the concerns of health and safety and so on has also proliferated new mechanisms for interviews to take place, right? If you are aware of, if you're following social media and so on, right, lots of online, even like us, right, from physical teachings, we have shifted to online platform for quite a number of weeks already, right? Similarly, interviews are taking place in the vision of internet, right? In the face of internet, forums, debates, discussion, right, and so on and so forth have been shifting to online platform, right? So it not necessarily has to be face to face, right, or through telephone, right, video call, video conferencing, so much and so of online softwares that allows for interview to take place, right? Right. When right, when interviewing a respondent, right, what we say is, you as a researcher, right, you as a researcher have the freedom to decide the format, right? You can arrange how you want the interview to be, right? Whether you want to start with the most difficult questions, right? Maybe you want to, or begin lightly, right? Like that you inquire about their background, right? The normal standard, their background, their age, the demographic questions, and followed by harder questions, right? Or that you have a format that you find suitable to interact with your respondent, right? And of course, the content of your questions, right? You can choose how to word them, how you want to ask them, and in what order, right? As I said earlier, right? We'll look into the prospects of, or why it is very important for you to construct a proper question with proper choice of words, right? So that you may invoke, right? So you may extract the right answers from your respondents, all right? The process of asking questions, right, also very much under the discretion of the researcher, right? Whether you want it to be very flexible or what you call, where you want it to be very rigid in a very formal environment, right? And so on and so forth, right? So under interview, right? This is also quite important, right? Which we can branch it into two different divisions, right? One is unstructured interview, right? And another one is structured interviews, right? Both methods can be found overlapping, right? Overlapping in qualitative methods as well, right? But how you are going to, what do you call? The difference is, right, however, right, how the information obtained through that in response to your questions, right? For instance, right, in quantitative, right, quantitative you have already enumerated, right? Maybe you have questions like 1 to 5. The first question asks, in your opinion, in a scale of 1 to 5, right, with saying that 5 is the highest, right, how would you rate your experience in McDonald's lunch hour, for instance, right? And then how would you rate the service of the customers, the employees, the workers at McDonald's during dinner time, and so on and so forth, right? This is how it is structured, it is worded and conducted in quantitative method. While in qualitative research, the responses of the respondents, right, basically used as descriptors, often verbatim, right? Whatever they say comes from their mouth. Right? You don't have to be writing down. You don't have to come up with a predetermined set of answers. Right? You only provide questions. Right? You don't scale them. In qualitative. In quantitative, you scale them, you measure them, you put it in different numbers, or in like what you call low, neutral, high, different measurement of different measuring scales, right? Right here, in unstructured interview, right? Extremely useful in exploring intensively and extensively and digging deeper into its situation, right? Basically because the questions are can be regarded as somehow open-ended, right? It's very much flexible. It has a structure, it has a content, and questions, the wording and order, right? It has a format, right? It is a very strategic format, right, for you to write the interview, right? You throw a question, right, within that question, right, you may extract the required answer, right? For the earlier information, right, only unstructured interviews you can find it both in quantity and qualitative research, right? But however, we will be focusing more on structured interview, right? It is predetermined, right, rigid and close, right? Like an example that I've given you on how the scaling process, the measurement scales, right, plays into the content. Right here, the researcher asks a predetermined setting the same questions using the same reading and order of questions, right? If you are meeting 10 different people, right, just assuming that you are meeting or interviewing 10 different respondents, right, the flow of the question would be same, right? The measurement scale would be same, right? The set of orders are already specified in the interview schedule, right? Interview questions, right? Right, you already have tested it, right? What we call as pre-testing, like pilot test, right? You have already tested it within your circles, right? Within your peers, with your friends or family members, and so on. It's already pre-tested whether these questions are workable or not, right? Whether it will help you to reach the objective of your research. Provides uniform information which assures the comparability of data, right? You can use this data they've collected to compare across your respondents, right? Maybe you want to compare the effectiveness medicine, right, in two different places, right? One may be Penang and maybe compared to right? Or you want to address the effectiveness of government hospitals in different states, right? So you have already have a pre-tested listed of questions, either open-ended or closed, right? The data to extract the data, right? Requires fewer interviewing skills, right? You don't have to don't have to probe them, right? In the sense that, let's say, they are lacking in qualitative research, for instance, right? Or in unstructured interview for that matter, right? You may have to ask a few different probing questions, right? So that they could share you more information, right? Here you already have a list of very specific questions on what are you trying to extract. Even though it's open-ended, maybe you have like 10 different questions that targets a very specific answer, right? Maybe it's very binary, yes or no kind of thing, right? An explanation that would lead you to the objective of your research, right? And we have this questionnaire, right? It's very much famous, right? It's highly used among university students, right? You turn wherever you want, right? You can find a lot of surveys and questionnaires popping out in in Google documents, right? Sending you Google survey forms and so on and so forth, right? It has become a common practice, right? But why is it so? Right? Why is it so popular, right? Why is it a method that is being highly used by a lot of researchers, right? Obviously, quantitative research, right? The basic understanding, right? It's a research method used to get information about certain groups of people, represented some larger group of interest. Right? Maybe you want to explore, right? You want to do a research about manufacturers of products, right? Maybe, for instance, top glove. Manufacturers of top glove want to know how people feel about the products, right? Recently, if you remember, there was a case about top glove employers discriminating, overworking, right? Their workers, right? They're asking the workers to work long hours with a minimum pay and so on. So, right? So maybe the top glove company, right? The management, the owners wants to do a survey to find out how people feel about the products, right? Or maybe a much easier example, like how people are perceiving the product of maybe Honda, right? Or any makeup kits, right? For the Mac or what else, Sephora or such, right? So they use surveys to find out people's perceptions, right? Some of the survey questions, right? People tries to answer like, what do people know, right? What do people think, right? What do they own? What do people do, right, in their pastime, right? Their hobbies, right? Or what do people have done in the past, right? Their background questions, right? Or their future plans, right? If you see like right now in Facebooks and so on, right? There are questions like that tries to figure out, right? What are your future ambitions, right? And then they try to formalize the advertisements to whatever that your interests have been, right? People's attitudes, right? Taste, prejudices, beliefs, right? Prejudices, beliefs, or biasness, or the way that they adhere to, right? On the other hand, right, we have also seen politicians, right, for that matter, have been frequently using surveys to find out what issues. Maybe this is not peculiar to Malaysia, right? But in different countries, we can see that. Right? What are the issues that is being highly discussed or highly disturbing the masses, right? So they would use that content during election periods as their campaigning tool, right? From there, they would develop a political manifesto, right? Election manifesto, right? What are the promises they intend to deliver to the voters, right? Here, besides that, right? Before that, right? What we can read here also, there are two kinds of surveys, right? You have to remember there are two kinds of surveys, right? One is descriptive and second is analytic, right? The descriptive survey, right, the purpose is to describe the population being studied, right? For instance, it wants to obtain information about their demographic factors, right? Basics one: age, gender, marital status, occupation, income, and so on, right? And then they relate this to the information to opinions or beliefs, values, and behaviors, right? Whether there are relationships between these things, right? We take for an example like broadcasters, right? Television broadcasters, right? Using surveys to find out how popular the programs are, right? And like manufacturers using surveys to determine who uses their products, right? Whether it is the people, urban-centric people, right? Or the populations, or the middle-class urban people, right? For that matter, and so on. The analytic survey, right? On the other hand, seeks to find out why people they do the way they do, right? These data are often used from descriptive surveys to develop hypotheses, and also use analytic surveys to test their hypothesis about what causes certain kinds of behavior. Remember, we developed variables, right, to determine whether there are causal relationship between certain kinds of behavior, right, whether this causes that, and so on and so forth, right? That's what we call as analytics. So, right, for your, but to be carried away, right? Maybe it sounds a bit difficult, but obviously surveys or questionnaires are much easier compared to other forms of what do you call methods of data collection, right? Right. Oh, here before I move forward, right? Written list of questions, right? Obviously, respondents read the questions, interpret what it is expected, then write down answer, right? Most of the times, questionnaires you send out in a large number, right? In a group, right? Because you expect a large number of people to respond to your questionnaires, right? So therefore, they would read, and also based on their own understanding, the respondents will chart down and note their answers, right, in the questionnaire form. Right, replies are recorded by respondents themselves. Right, you won't be there sitting down, listening to them and chart down the answers. Most of the times in questionnaire form, the respondents will be answering directly, right, without any interference between you and the respondent. Right. So whatever the understanding of the questions, right, of the topic and so on, right, it is entirely up to them. Right. If it is misunderstood, then it is misunderstood because you won't be there to explain the question to the respondent. Right. Therefore, it is very important for you to construct a clear and easy to understand questions. Right. We'll see some basic guidelines, right, how you can construct your questions, how to formulate your research questions in the simplest way, and some guidelines, right, so that you don't generate double meanings, right, and so on and so forth. Right. So flow or the sequence of the question should be easy to flow, right? These are some general things. Right, there should be a flow, right? If let's say the first section you are only questioning about the demographic qualities, and then you jump to maybe whether they are exposed to certain products. Maybe if like say you are still doing a research for maybe the first part you just want to know whether they have heard of dog glove, right? Whether they have been using the product, right? How many years they have been using that, and so on and so on. Maybe, and then second, the second section, right, would be much more in detail, right? Maybe, so it will like a progress to the issue that you are delving, right? The issue that you are targeting to explore. Be interactive, like if it's online form of questionnaires, then it would be better for you to construct an interactive questionnaires, right? Whether if they are, let's say if in section A, if they have answered this, it leads them to directly to section they don't have to spend time in section 2, something like that. Maybe if they have FNQ, right, and so on and so forth. They should feel that, right, this is your creativity, right? This in the end it boils down to your creativity, right? How we want to formulate that the respondent doesn't feel bored or there are too many questions to be answered. Right? Sensitive questions or questions that might make a respondent feel hesitant should be prefaced with a statement explaining the dynamics, right? If you think that it might trigger sensitive responses, right, or it would hinder your respondents to respond in a truthful manner, right, then it is better for you to preface them like a brief explanation, right, why this statement or why this question is relevant to your question, to your research topic, right? Or maybe you can also add some disclaimers in the beginning of your questionnaire form, where the identity of the respondents, right, would be anonymous, it would be concealed, and so on and so forth, right? So it will make them to be, it will let them to feel they are safer right? They are safe and their answers could not be manipulated and so on and so forth. Right. So what are the ways of administering your questionnaire, right? Right now, of course, technology allows you to send it through online platforms and so on, right? But besides that, right, what are the other ways do we have to administer? Of course, the classic one is the mail questionnaire, right? You have the mail address, right, or even either email, right, or the house address, right? So you can send it to them, right? Directly to the house, etc. Must be accompanied by a cover letter, basically a letter that says you are from here and here, right? This is the purpose that you are sending this questionnaire, right? You are belonging to the student of Anshang, for instance, right? You are conducting research about this and that, so therefore you need their the respondents help to finish your research on all that, right? That's what the basic content of a cover letter. Okay. However, the major problem, right, is to gain their response, right? People might overlook your emails, right? Landing out then, what do you call it, in spams and so on. So if it's directly mailed to their house address, right? If it doesn't ring some bell, if they don't find it, because the amount of efforts they have to do in going to postal office and to send back to is all involves time and effort and also money, right? So hinder from getting your preferred answers from your response. Collective administration, right? Obtaining a captive audience such as students in a classroom, workers in a workplace, people attending functions in a program, right? This is like basically you are what do you call going to a place, right? Going to a place, and then where you can find your respondents in a large number, right? Like if you want to find, for instance, right, maybe the caterers, right? Take the examples of wedding function, right? The caterers wants to identify, right, how the people react to the food they have prepared, right? In that sense, right, then you can just provide a questionnaire form that placed in their dining tables at the wedding function, and people can leave their response behind, right? So this can ensure a high response rate, right? Because people don't have to do extra effort; they just have to tick the boxes and so on and so forth, right? At the spot, so it wouldn't consume much of their time. Right? There's a personal contact with the study population can explain the purpose, relevance, right? Like example, like if you feel like I am interested to find out how effective this class has been, right? How much you have learned from this class, maybe my personal contact with the students would be helpful in receiving the data, right? And then collective, right? And then we have online questionnaires, right? Okay, right. This is exactly what I've said, but we can come back to this later. But these are basic things, right? Communication technology, right? You don't have to personally be delivering the questionnaire forms, but you can do it in collective manner, right? You may post it either on a website, social media, or to mobile phones. Can analyze the data collected through a product. Like for instance, you have the SPSS software and so on. Right? In a public place, right? This was supposed to be online questions, right? This collective administration, this is supposed to be online questions, right? And then followed by administration public place, like shopping centers, health center, hospital, where you can find a huge number of a huge crowd. All right. This is guided by the logic that the type of study population you are looking for and where it is likely to be found. Right? The purpose of the study is usually explained to your potential respondents as they approach and their participation in the study is requested. Like if you've seen shopping malls and so on, right? People engage you and then try to explain and then extract their responses and so on. Right? The basic advantage, right, or why it is very by quantitative, right? It's less expensive, offers greater anonymity, right? Most of the time, the researcher and the respondent wouldn't have to meet directly, right, face to face. It keeps the identity anonymous, right? Disadvantages, right? Limited application, right? Limited to a study population that can read and write, right? Maybe this would prevent, right? Maybe older people who have difficulties in reading, right? Or the disabled people, right? Who can't answer the question, right? This might exclude them from the questionnaires. Right. So low response rate, right? Like I have seen the difficulties of people are not interested to, because normally questionnaires could be laid up to few pages, right? Self-selecting bias, right? If you're only selecting those who right, personally, right, and it would be reflecting biases. Lack of opportunity to clarify issues, right? You don't have if you have if you don't have the opportunity to read and explain, right? So it is entirely up to their own understanding. No opportunity for spontaneous responses, right? It is not like an interaction where you throw a question and then they come out with spontaneous responses, right? It is much more numerated, right? Open-ended, closed questions, right? We see the open-ended respondent write down the answers in their own words, right? You don't give them answers. Right? Let's see, what do you call it? You don't give them a measurement scale, right? Between low, average, high, and so on, right? So here you leave it blank so that they can write down the answers. The researcher records answer either verbatim or in a summary. Closed questions, right? The normal question, right? This will be how does it look, and what you call closed questions in question, right? The basic demographic questions, right? And then followed by more specific questions, right? These are the differences between closed and open-ended questions, right? This is the 5-step answer scale, which is highly preferred, right? Degree, so full supposed to be here 5, right? Not at all supposed to be here 1, right? So you have questions, different questions, and you have to circle or tick whatever it is, right? So this can be changed according to your measurement scale, Likert scale, different forms of measurement scale that you can adopt, right? According to your research question and which one do you prefer, right? And obviously you have to justify why you're using this form of scale instead of others, right? Yeah. Right. 5 commandments of question wording, right? These are the general tips that we were speaking earlier, right? Make sure that you don't have ambiguous concepts, right? Restrain yourself from writing ambiguous concepts, right? So that it is direct and straightforward, that your respondents could understand in the way that you in the way that all respondents could comprehend the questions in the same way, right? So that you don't have differences of understanding. And then avoid long and complex. So it's make sure it's very straightforward, right? It's short, in simple words, right? Don't drag it. Right? Avoid hypothetical questions, basically which may generate what if, let's say, given a scenario of 9/11, right? What if the Twin Tower was not built at all, right? This kind of hypothetical question should be avoided at all costs, right? Define unclear concepts, right? This is your role as a researcher. This is your responsibility, right? Define the unclear concepts. If there are any like unambiguous concepts, right? Try to keep it like let's say concepts of patriarchy, right? You have to define what is it, right? Or concepts of capitalism, right? Not everybody could understand the concepts and so on and so forth, right? So, what assumptions and suggestive questions, right? Don't put your assumptions in, right? Do you maybe you have a belief or assumptions on, like say the 9/11, right? And then you insert it in a subtle way, right? Don't do that, right? Suggestive questions as well. All right, you can pick the examples, right? Over here. And then we go into experiment, right? Experiment usually involves modifying something in a particular situation, right? Or it concludes by comparing outcomes in situation with and without modification. Here, quantitative measurements will be taken to establish objective, right? What do you call? What is the motivation, right? The motivation behind experiments and so on and so forth, right? Here, experiments are normally conducted in a controlled environment, right? Like for instance, I think I've told you about the Bandura's experiment, right? How they wanted to find out, right, how the children behaving differently to the introduced variables and circumstances involved, right? So similarly, right, here experiments, right, it wants to modify how do you call, right, the observation, right, may be focused on a deliberate intervention in one group, right, and then compared to a second group. For instance, like in psychology, right, you compare the group A with group B with the different variables, right? Group A, you have, let's say, you have television and then violent content, right? And then group B, you have television but all doesn't have any single violent content. So you observe whether there are different attitudes, different pattern of behavior between these two groups. Then you compare the outcomes, right? With and without the modification, right? As I told you, okay. Or another example, right? Maybe a teacher in a school, right? Based on the experiment, right? We want to apply an intervention to identify whether they have managed to reduce aggression, right, in a group. So that's how experiments basically conducted. Function as a procedure or kind of test that one demonstrates whether something is true, right? Let's say like scientific experiments, but let us keep it grounded to what is it? Social research, right? Social science researchers, right? Whether when there's a theory, like let's say we take the theory of that says opposites that television makes people to consume drugs, right? Then you want to identify whether this is true. Then you conduct an experiment. Right? You conduct an experiment, then you interview different people, right? Putting them into observation, right? Saying that one group is exposed to all the content that uses drugs, glorifies drugs, and another individual that watches only programs that have biblical content for that matter, and so on, right? So you will find out whether it's true. Right? Maybe you find out that you cancel that hypothesis, that you cancel that theory, that not everyone who are exposed to content that promotes drugs, right, doesn't abuse the consumption of drugs, doesn't abuse drugs, basically. Right? Or it tries to discover new information, right? New information like whether, like if you take the example of what you call whether in 2008 when there was right people wanted to identify, right, whether internet, the social media were playing a part, were playing a role, in the fall of 5 different states at that point of time to the hands of opposition, right? So that you can discover new information. Then your experiment would say that yes, it has been the internet was playing a role to the fall of the 5 different states. Right. The structure of an experiment, right, involves 2 groups of people. Normally, normal circumstances, right, the experimental group and the control group, aka treatment, intervention, and stimulus group, right? And then, which means this is the group that will be introduced to the thing that you are trying to identify, right? Things that you want to research about. Like when I say you expose them to, let's say you want to find out that people from age to 15 to 30 are very matured, that they will not be influenced by any random content on films and so on, right? So then you want to find out. And then another control group, those who are not exposed to anything, right? What do you call it? So these are the 2 differences, right? The 2 different groups, and normally occurs. Right? Persons must be randomly assigned to either the experimental group or the control group, which means you, let's say you have a general population, right? Take the population of Penang, right? You just want to experiment how Penang people reacts to the shutdown of hawker food, right? Hawker stalls and so street food, right? Basically, what I wanted to say, street food. Then you put it one in the experimental group and the control group, but it has to be random. You cannot be selective. You cannot be selective in the sense that you want one particular ethnicity to be in this group and then another particular ethnicity in another group. That kind of that kind of perception, right? That kind of biasness has to be prevented, right? A pre-test shall be conducted like a pilot test, right? Most of these quantitative methods require a pilot test, right? You might wanted to do it in a smaller group before you expanding to a real research, right? So that you could already test it, whether it's workable, right? Whether it's feasible, right? How effective it is, whether it could lead you to your research question, right? We'll see how it works, right? Right, performing the experiment, introduce one independent variable to the experimental group, right? Here you introduce whatever variables that you want, right? Like the content, the violent content, the drug abuse content, whatever it is, to see whether they have differences in their attitude or behavior according to your research objective. Right, and then conduct a post-test to identify if there's a significant difference between the experimental group to the variables introduced, right? So you can find the comparisons, right, whether there are differences or not, right? Some research checklists on experimental design, right? This book has been already updated, right, to the latest version. You can also look for it. Right, these are the questions that you can explore yourself, right? The basic checklist, how were the subjects selected, right? So it increased the validity and also reliability of your population, and also the method you have chosen to conduct. Right. Random assignment of your subjects, right? Right, these are the things that you have to consider when you're conducting an experimental design, right? Advantages and disadvantages, right? If you have any questions over here, we can discuss it in our lecture and tutorial period. Here, advantages and disadvantages, right? Provide strong evidence that a given independent, again, very similar, very simple and straightforward, right? Here, it gives you strong evidence, right? Whether this these variables that has been introduced can actually affect, right? Whether can actually affect the attitude, the behavior, whatever it is now, right? Like you want to identify the role of internet, right, in a controlled environment, right? Right. Unrecognized phenomenon, right? Which basically says that it negates, right? It discards, right, any potential of external causal effects, right? So it's very much, if let's say, if you again, I go back to the examples of Bandura's experiments, where it says that if you're exposed for a long time to a violent content, right, and then when they are rewarded, when the characters in television that the group A, where the character in the televisions are rewarded for being violent, the experimented population, right, the experimented samples in that group will behave similarly, because one, they are exposed for a long time to violent content. Second, they are being rewarded for being violent, right? So the phenomenon, right, the effect that is taking place is because they are being rewarded, what we call vicarious reinforcement, right? You can look in the Bandura's experiment. And it's replicable, which means other researchers can conduct the same experiment to ensure its validity, right? The same research you can conduct with a different group of people, right? Can be replicated, can be conducted multiple times to ensure its validity. Disadvantages: artificial conducted generally in laboratories, right? Let's say like in Bandura's experiment, right? It is a laboratory experiment, right? You put them in a confined spaces, in a space where you want them to be. So the natural elements around them, the interference of the parents, their peers, what you call family members, access to content, and all those things are negated. All those are not relevant anymore, right? So it's very artificial, right? Then you might question, right? Doesn't people interact with their elders before comprehending the content, and so on and so forth? Right here, if they know that they're being experimented, right, people will be more conscious, right? They don't want to be affected. They may try to hold themselves together, right, so that they don't give in easily whatever that can be considered as affecting their behavior. Overemphasizing cause and effect relationship, right? This basically similar to the artificial solar, right? You always say these are the specific cause and which causes the effect, right? Denying the other factors that may be involved as well, right? Basically, this is it, right? So I want you to do this, what you call the tutorial, right? I just numbered it group 1, group 2, and group 3. Can be any angle, right? Whatever angle that you have chosen, right? Whether you want to start with a demographic question and then followed by specific things is up to you, right? So that would be it, all right? So I'll see you, right? Okay.